Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today we're gonna bring on my friend Zach, man. We're gonna take some paths down the road to breakthroughs, and we're gonna be able to, make sure we walk on the right path. He's one of he had breakthroughs, and he helps people with business, but he has an amazing story. How are you doing, Zach?
Hello, I'm doing excellent. I've had a great day today. I'm here in Dubai. It's the afternoon, and I'm really looking forward to this. We connected just the last couple of weeks. Really enjoying what you're doing online, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks a lot, Zach, for the opportunity. Glad we got connected and we'll move things forward. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start into the episode.
Well, the short story is I'm a big believer in entrepreneurship. My two parents and my two step parents were all entrepreneurs. And so I think it's one of the best things that we can do to innovate and make the world a better place. I think when there's less confidence now more than ever in the government and certain structures to save the day, I really believe community and people coming together are going to be the solutions for the future for humanity. And I think entrepreneurship is one of the best things we can do for our own personal evolution as well as it builds character. You know, the roller coasters of life and the roller coasters of entrepreneurship, to say the least, build character. And I think for society, people with strong characters are important for the evolution of society. But growing up, I actually had three of my parents were into health and wellness, alternative health and wellness. And so I grew up in a quite a holistic, I guess, new age
Hmm.
home. And I went to a Rudolf Steiner school, which is like a hippie school. Well, Rudolf Steiner was a genius. He knew how to build land and grow culture, gardens, and had a philosophy on education that I think is incredible today compared to a lot of the educational structures. But as a kid, I didn't appreciate it because we learned about Greek mythology, or we learned about music and art and movement and just things that I don't know. I didn't progress very fast in terms of math or English. So when I moved when I was 12 from Perth, the west coast of Australia, to the east coast of Australia, to Sydney, I was held back a grade.
Mm.
I was able to skip a grade ahead, but I wasn't smart enough. And so I stayed back a grade, and I had extra tutors and I had extra support to kind of push me forward. Now, not to say that that education growing up wasn't good. It just wasn't designed for the educational
Right. It wasn't designed for
industrial
the format.
revolution.
I mean, you could have talked about Greek mythology more than most of your peers, right? No, but some of those things and the how to apply some of that knowledge really makes you different, and not in a bad way, right? So, everybody goes different, and we're so trained that the only way to teach is the old way, the old methods, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? And you need all those things. I'm not trying to suggest that you don't, but it really, there's ways to open up your mind. I hear things like that. I mean, like here in the States, we have Montessori schools, and it's different ways of learning to get to the same place. But it also, I would say that you probably think more critically, or be able to see the bigger picture rather than somebody who might have learned things differently. What do you think?
I think that could be pretty accurate. Yeah, I guess the holistic way of education within the Rudolf Steiner school was quite beneficial for me for sure. Yeah, we did Egyptian mythology, we did geometry with protractor and compass and doing these incredible drawings. And I think and we did lots of plays and lots of just time outside learning about nature and gardening. So, these things that I really appreciate now, but growing up, I was like, why did you send me to these schools, parents? Like, why? This is, wasn't able to fit in. So, growing up, the reason I bring that up is that, our family was probably, low to medium socioeconomic. I didn't come from wealth, but they were all entrepreneurs. All four of my parents were entrepreneurs. My two parents and two step parents were all entrepreneurs. And so I guess I learned from a very young age on how to think outside the box, problem
Mm,
solving.
sure.
I was a kid that played computer games. I had zero confidence. I never did any public speaking in high school. I would always wait or hide at the back of the room to try to get an average mark on all my public speaking because I was just unable to communicate. I never asked any questions in high school. I never put my hand up. It was one of those things. It was the inner dialogue was, I'm not good enough. How can I, I'm not smart enough. What do they think of me? I think a lot of that crippled me for a long period of time until I got into acting outside of school. I got into sales and marketing to push my comfort zone of rejection. I got into telemarketing and door knocking, and then I started acting, and then I actually landed some commercials and film and a TV show and then live television in Australia. So I just kept pushing myself into these uncomfortable situations to grow. And I fell into the two things, which was entrepreneurship and health and wellness. And so I ended up doing network marketing. My first team, I had like 4,000 members, like affiliate marketing. I had 4,000 team members. And my second company, I had 10,000 team members. And so I did quite well, brought in, $15 million for the second company. This was throughout COVID. And I really got to experience what freedom was like, residual income, being able to, pretty much travel and spend time with anyone I wanted even during COVID, would fly around and still meet my friends and family and travel the world. But yeah, and that gave me just an incredible insight on travel, the world, geography, cultures, religions, people, and society. And so now I've actually been traveling for 2 years nonstop. I haven't been back in Australia. I did Thailand, Mexico, US. Now I'm in Dubai. And yeah, life is an adventure. I think there's a few things that every culture has as the foundation, which is family. Family, no matter where I go in the world, family is super important. Unfortunately, a lot of the world that we live in doesn't support the family unit anymore. There's lots of separation and addiction or mental illness or stress and low health amongst many communities these days, unfortunately. And the other similarity amongst the people that I'm meeting is faith. They all have a spiritual connection, that's built into their culture, which is beautiful. And the other part is I've realized everyone's a little bit crazy, in their own way. Everyone's unique, no one's the same, everyone's figuring it out. But at the end of the day, we get to choose. And I really like the movie The Matrix, where Morpheus offers the red pill or the blue pill.
Mm.
And if you take the blue pill, you end up back in the normal rat race of life. And if you take the red pill, it's the doorway to seeing how deep the rabbit hole goes, so to speak, and the full truth and nothing but the truth. And so from a very young age, even I think before being here, God wanted me to take the red pill. So I'm a very curious person. I love interviewing people on my podcast as well. And at the end of the day, life is short. So I'm really trying to do my best to squeeze the lemon and add as much value to the world as possible on the way.
Yeah, and well, I guess one way looking at it is your parents from a young age gave you the red pill, right? So the different way of looking at no, no, really, I'm giving a different way of growing up, right? Right, for the 12 years when you're learning. I mean, even from what I heard you say is also you had acting, you put on plays, which then prepared you for sales and things like that. So
Yeah.
and then they gave you the blue pill and before to finish up some of your career and you found some of the struggles and you still overcame those struggles. Those are the things that I'm hearing out of that. And then then of course when you had to we get kicked out of the tree, right? We get kicked out of the nest and we start working our own lives. You've embraced that part and that's how you found your path. What does that path mean to you?
What does the path mean to me?
Yeah, so for
Wow.
me, yeah, so I'll explain. So for me, when I explain to people about paths, I'm a pathfinder. I call myself a pathfinder, and I help people go through the obstacles. Ram Dass there's a very famous quote by metaphysical guy Ram Dass, who actually used to have the blue pill by working for Harvard. Most people don't know it was Richard Albert was his first name, but then he went through some changes and he became Ram Dass, one of the world's premier, you know, gurus in the 60s. And one of his comments that I always talk about is we all walk each other home. So your path is might be different than mine, but we get to walk each other. So right now, you and I are walking together on this little journey during the podcast. But the path for me is personal attitude towards happiness. That's how I started my company. I wanted to make everybody happy. I thought happy was I thought it was a place. And while it's still a journey, that's the path that I'm talking about. What is your journey? It's a long way of explaining it, but
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's a great question. I really believe the path that best suits my soul. Well, there's two paths actually.
okay, sure.
There's the path of convenience. There's the path of convenience, the path of short-term pleasure, the path of quick fix, kind of fast satisfaction. And I think there's the path of the less traveled. So,
Hmm.
which is typically a path of patience, a path of humility, a path of heaviness of the world, and a lot of the slow way. So there's like the fast lane and there's the slow lane.
Sure.
What I've found in life is that anytime that I've taken the fast lane of maybe the quick fix, the get rich quick, the get healthy quick, the fall in love quick, or business thing, or spirit, trying to get to enlightenment too fast, it typically takes my life onto the road of chaos, the road of bipolar, so to speak, not, the ups and downs of the roller
Yep, yep,
coasters of life.
yep.
And I think whether that be food and nutrition, I started my journey when I was younger. I had a lot of health challenges. Even though my parents were in holistic wellness, I think it was a lot of emotional stress that really drained me.
Sure.
Sleep issues, acne, gut health, learning difficulties, things like this. And so it wasn't until I met my first mentor, who was 16 years older than me. When I was 17, he taught me fitness, nutrition, posture, just the basics. And I turned my life around really quickly. I lost a bunch of weight. I put a bunch of muscle on. And I realized it's not that hard to change if you know the right strategy, if you know the right system. It
Mm,
doesn't matter how smart you are. If you can go to the gym and you eat this way and you do this sleeping process and you fill this into your day, anyone can get healthy and anyone can get well and very well, or very muscular, very fit. And so that path, though, the path of results and a masterpiece of life, typically was on the other path, which was the slower path, which is consistency, discipline, patience, humility. And that typically within my life, I've done a lot of fasting. I'm
mhm.
very big on just looking after my mind and body and spirit to the best of my ability. And in doing that, it typically creates a life that's a masterpiece, whether it's the communities that I've built around my life, or the people around me, or the travel, or the business success that I've had, is typically when I've followed this life of I guess high impact, high purpose, but purpose over profit. That's really what it's about. And I think there's those two paths. At the end of the day, I'm doing my best to live a life based on truth. Whether it's the first principles of physics, or whether it's the biblical teachings that are scattered throughout a lot of our life. But I never grew up understanding the Bible. I never went to church, so to speak. I found it when I was about 27. I saw a real life exorcism, and it changed my whole mindset on the spiritual, the esoteric, the invisible forces in our world. And so I think a lot of the world that we're trying to figure out, there's no manual really in the normal. Like, I never was given a manual on how to live my life in a great way. I was learning from my parents, but they were just figuring it out, and they were learning from their parents, and they were just figuring it out.
That's one
So,
of right. That's one of
well,
the biggest things in the world is to figure. Once you can get that, but that also sounds like it's a lot of inner work, right? So it's a lot of self-realization, because that's how you do it, is figuring out how that all put together. Because even if you go to church and all that, and I do want to talk about the exorcism for a second. I can't let that go. But no, but it is all that inner work we do that really takes us to that next level. And you know we're all learning, we're all growing. I mean, I didn't have a great relationship with my dad, but once I was able to give him some forgiveness, or both of us forgiveness in ways, because he was just doing the what best he could at that time. He didn't. we take it very personal, but it's not always about us. You know.
Well, for sure. I think that, yeah, like I'm here in Dubai with some friends and they have their children. And the children, I'm learning so much just watching them, how they develop and how they grow. I've been here a couple of months now, and it's amazing to see not just the size of them growing, but also their vocabulary or just their presence. And they're learning from each other, which sometimes isn't the best. We learn through example, and one of them starts like hitting one of the, I don't know, starts punching one of them, and the other one starts punching them. We start to like just join in. I think the weirdest thing about society and biology and human behavior is that if more people are doing something, then it means that it's like if there's social proof, it means that there's maybe some kind of like less pain or more safety in numbers, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way. Just because a whole bunch of society is doing one thing, certain ways of learning, certain ways of earning, certain ways of doing health and wellness or spirituality, just because the masses are doing one way, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best approach, especially for yourself. And so I think it's just built into our biology. If other people are doing it, I want to do it too. But then sometimes that might be leading us off the edge, the pipe piper walking us off the edge of the mountain. And so it's really important to have that self-awareness, the right people around, coaching, right? Consulting,
Yeah,
trainers
being around the
to
right
allow us
people.
to, yeah, to have counsel and the right people to spot our blind spots. I think one of the you know the great thing about leadership, and I think leadership is one of the biggest pandemics, so to speak, in the world in terms of it's a massive global issue that's been going on for a long time. That's the real pandemic, is that there's lack of leadership, or there's leadership and power with people that shouldn't have the power or the leadership, in my
Mm.
opinion. And so, well, then how do we bring that power back? Well, we start to lead our own life and we start to work together. But the dark side of leadership is that you typically, those that are in a state of leadership, they have the blinkers on and they don't listen to the outside world, which can definitely help, because to not think about the rejection or think about the suffering or think about the pressures of the world it's like a safety mechanism to go lock in and just
Mhm.
work. But at the same time, that also like stops people from critiquing or self-analyzing their own behavior.
Sure.
And I think any time that power is experienced in humanity, I think it's part of the human experience, that power can definitely corrupt if it's for if it's let if it's let if it's unleashed for long enough in the wrong hands, it definitely corrupts. What do they say? It's like
Yeah,
Brave New World says power corrupts, absolute
the
power
power
corrupts
corrupts
absolutely.
absolutely.
And that's why we need more than ever, spiritual biblical teachings, or just to really reflect on what's working and what's not. And that's a process in itself.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I haven't forgot about the exorcism, but because even if it's just a metaphor, right? So I'd love to hear your experience, because I've never met anybody who's been part of an exorcism, and let's talk about some deep inner work, I guess.
Yeah, look, I was traveling in Tasmania at the time with a friend of mine and with two other friends, and we were looking for some land for a farm to kind of find some farm to do off the grid living. And so on this journey, I was driving down the road one night. It was a sunset. It was beautiful. And I was feeling this unconditional love, this like overwhelming presence of just, I was just in a state of bliss, and I started crying. And my friend in the back, and I said, all I feel right now is love. I feel so much love. And my friend in the back says, all I feel is hate. I hate this place. I want to get out of here. This is horrible. And I'm all like, whoa, what's going on? And so we stopped, and then we went to where we were staying. And as we're walking down the driveway, it was kind of getting into dusk. And he starts like hitting himself and speaking in a weird kind of sound. And it was really bizarre, something out of like Harry Potter. And then, so my friend used some words from the Bible. He was Christian and he knew a lot of the Bible. And he said, I bind you in Jesus' name. And literally, my friend, from hitting himself, his arms went like this, his feet connected, and he fell over. And we had to catch him. And so it was wild. And then we were like, what is your name? How many of you? And from my understanding is the hierarchy of spirituality is that if these spirits are there, they have to abide to the word of Jesus. And so literally the my friend said a name. I never heard this name in my life, but we looked it up online afterwards, and it was a documented medieval demon. And it was shocking. So he was in shock. We were all in shock the next couple of days. And then a couple of days later, we were camping and there was these moments of prayer and I had no idea what to do. And so I was like, what do I do? And my friend was like, just say, thank you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. I'm like, okay, whatever happens, like whatever happened the other night, I believe now. And so we were just praying and praying. And my friend's arms, we were sitting, he was in the middle, we were on the side, and his arms were frailing like this for like 2 hours. He was like feeling fidgety and like this. And the next day, he said these spirits were coming out of his mouth and literally holding onto his arms and like then going into the pit of hell. Wild, wild experience. And afterwards, we fell asleep. And the next day, my other friend, he goes overseas. I stay in Tasmania with my other friend, and we found some land, which is a great kind of ending to the story. But the story doesn't end there. My friend goes overseas, and he went to a music festival. He felt wildly uncomfortable at the music festival, so he left. He's like, something's not right. So he packs his bags, starts walking, and hitchhikes up the LA Boulevard or whatever the highway is
Yeah.
there in LA and Santa Monica. And he gets in a car, and the guy's driving to San Francisco. And long story short, the man that picked him up was a Christian and was going to a Christian community.
Wow.
Wow. And then, long story short, I left Tasmania. I went to another event. I met this lady who broke her back and riding a horse. And she went to hospital. She was on her bed waiting for the operation. And literally, she was listening to a sermon on television. And her body flipped off the table and was rolling around and then flipped back onto the bed, something like some kind of divine intervention. And the next day, her back was healed.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
she's telling me this story, and I'm getting goosebumps, and I'm like, the energy that she was sharing the story in, I was feeling it was a real story. I was like, you're not lying, are you? She's like, no, if you want to learn more, come to this event in Melbourne called The Awakening. And I'd never been to a church like this. I'd never been to any kind of religious event or anything like this, but it was like 50,000 people, sports arena, Melbourne, in the heart of Melbourne, where they would play, big rock concerts. So I went there and just connected with the community. People were praying for people, and I was unaware that, so many people just want to help people. Can I pray for you? Can I pray for you? I'm like, it's a nice thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure, no
sure.
worries. It's like I got nothing to lose. Like that's a nice gesture. No one's ever said that to me before. I feel touched. And then, long story short, I had a really positive experience. And one of the pastors that I met there, Patrick, he was a great man. And I said, would you baptize me? Because they were all getting baptized down at the river.
Mm, sure.
Melbourne is built on a big river.
Yep.
And so the next day I got baptized in the river in front of 500 people, and it was this whole, big community thing. And the next day, I messaged my friend who was overseas, who went in the car to
Yep.
the other Christian community randomly, and he had just got baptized the same week that I got baptized. He sent a video, and he got baptized in the river where this community was, and I got baptized in the river in Melbourne. And so there's this. I sent him a video, he sent me his video, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, we got baptized in the same week." You can't make this stuff up. You
No,
just can't
and
make this
and
stuff
and
up.
and that's why I was like, it's incredible how these things come up, and you know, I don't know, there's a lot of people who might not believe, and I'm talking about believing in God as a general, and that's okay. I'm not here to preach. Again, I come from a Jewish faith, so it's not. I've always, I have lots of friends who are Christians, and we have conversations, and I'll joke. I'll be like, look, I don't know. Jesus was Jewish when he died, but I'm open that he's the son of God. I don't know. I wasn't there, right? That's a comment I always make. I go because I don't want when I die, God to say, hey, you ignored my son. But I think if we follow the precedence of what he was teaching, right? The teachings are the teachings, right? The Ten Commandments, the you know, honor thy father, which I didn't always do. But it's one of those things. If we're good people, it doesn't matter, and that's why good people gotta find good people. I mean, you've been in the coaching space for a while, so you know that there are people who are less than good. From their perspective, maybe they are right. From the devil's side, it could be that they're good, but the people who are really there, who want to who are on the right path, who find the breakthroughs, like yourself, that's the really powerful parts that we want to focus on. And those are the guests that I want to have on my podcast, is those people who not only align with their own path, but get other people breakthroughs.
And look, if there's one thing interviewing now over 100 entrepreneurs and investors for my podcast, is that about 70% of them talk about how during their breakthrough moments and these transitions through success in business, a lot of them had a breakdown of some kind,
Sure.
a family chaos or a breakup or a marriage or a heart attack or something happened in the economy and they lost this. And, so then they had to transition and figure out a new path. And in order to not just adapt, but thrive, not just to survive, but thrive on a new path, there had to be a change in identity. And in that identity, there's a process of letting go of the past, letting go of beliefs, letting go of identity, letting go of just, a way of perceiving our own self or habits or friends or people. Like, there's a lot that needs to be let let go of when having a breakthrough. And so in doing that, 70% of the people that I interviewed talk about faith being an important part of their breakthrough moment. Now, each person has their own definition of faith, right? Depending on their own religion and
Sure.
their views. But if there's one common denominator that to connect with their faith, it doesn't matter if someone's Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever it is that there's a state of silence. And in silence, that's where we can listen to the voice of God. And I think a lot of the world that we live in today, whether it be social media, whether it be the toxins in our environment with food or different chemicals in our environment, these are unprecedented times, or even just the stress of the economy and the crazy turbulent geopolitical environment. These are puts more pressure on the nervous system than ever before. And we see heart disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, autoimmune diseases off the charts. And unfortunately, a lot of these challenges that we're going through today are man-made. They didn't exist
Right.
100, 200, 300 years ago in societies or cultures or tribes. There's tribes even that are traditional that never had cancer, never had heart disease, never had diabetes. What did they do? Well, a lot of the time, the environment was very different. They would have had more. Well, that's a whole nother story. I've got
Yeah.
a big list of all the things that you can do to kind of really repair ourselves. But I think it's in that silence we're able to listen to God and direct our lives from that place. And anytime I'm on that fast path, that fast road, there's a lot of noise. And with so much noise, it takes my life off balance a lot of the time. So I'm just doing the best I can to find my groove, and
Well, I think some of the,
each day is a wild adventure.
yeah, and I'll agree with to that. Sometimes the fast path, right, that leads us to our breakdowns and our breakthroughs, because we are looking for those shiny objects. Look, I've been guilty of that. I don't, on the show I talk about it all the time. I've made lots of mistakes, but I've learned from those mistakes. Because and the same thing as a parent, you have to let them skin their knee. You have to, we have to have that
Right.
to learn what to do or how to do it that much better. What are some of the breakthroughs in your life that you had to learn through? Obviously, being baptized the same time and going through that experience had to change you, right? You might have not have been strong in your faith, but then starting to see some things that made you question, right? Questioning is good, right? That's that slow part of it where we start questioning, we start thinking a little bit differently. Explain how you had that shift from not necessarily a fast path, but when you had those breakthroughs to help you see much clearer.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it was it's a lot of unlearning that
Mm,
happened for me. So unlearning regarding, I guess, so I used to want to do acting, film and television, right? When I was 21, I went to LA, did some acting classes, and I was, you know, trying to learn the American dialect and, you know, how to pronounce effectively the Australian culture. We don't have a very we have a lot of slang and we mumble a lot of our words and we speak in a different way. So I really learned how to actually communicate a lot coming to America. Everyone was like, "What are you saying? What are you saying, man?" I'm like, "Oh, okay. I need to pronounce everything, not
mm,
everything, you
right.
know." And so, you know, whether it was my beliefs around what I wanted to do as an actor, like I never wanted to be an actor just to be famous. I wanted to be an actor because I saw people in a state of authority when someone was a celebrity or an actor, they had this status that people would listen to them. And when people listen to you, you can make change. That's really a leader, is someone who's able to lead and share a vision and to move people towards that vision. And as a kid, I had a lot of self-doubt, and as I mentioned, a lot of self-esteem issues. And so I saw acting as a way of like, this is the most outrageous goal I could ever put into my vision. But when I went to Tony Robbins when I was 18 years old,
Mhm.
he said, create a vision and create an end goal that's so big that even and so meaningful that even if you don't achieve it, at least it's helped you evolve and to become the type of person that you wanted to become. And the most furthest thing away from my belief system was to do acting because I would literally play computer games 16 hours a day outside of just before high school. I'd play World of Warcraft 16 hours a day. I was flipping good. I was really good. I sold my account for $850 actually. So, you know, the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. But the reason I bring that up is that, you know, when I started learning about the world that we live in, and to be honest, how my friend presented a lot of the Christian teachings to me was actually showing me the evil in the world. And we don't need to look too far or that much to see the evil in the world. And so I was like, well, if there's evil, then there must be love. There must be, you know, truth. What is that?
Right.
And that's how he kind of opened me up to that. And I was like, okay, yeah, well, I don't have any stigmas or any bad experiences around Jesus or learning. Like, who is he? What is he about? And I just wanted to learn. And so I think in doing that, I think a lot of my beliefs around wealth changed? Like, what is wealth? You know, is it the amount of money or is it the richness of the relationships and the impact that you make in someone's life? So I think I changed a lot of that. I think I changed my understanding around relationships. You know, growing up, Tinder was a way of dating from a quite an early age, and I every movie that I ever watched was all about sex before marriage, right? There was no um, moral compass
Right. Right.
on sexual etiquette.
It's those quick things, right? The shiny objects that they
Exactly.
talk about
Yeah.
versus having a deeper relationship. And, you know, and that sounds like a beautiful shift within you is recognizing it. I mean, some of us get it later in life, you know, and some of us get it earlier in life. From your experiences, you know, that's what made you, and you know what's helped you in your entrepreneurship as well is that knowing about the deeper relationships and the value about a long-term relationship rather than something that's just going to be, hey, let's, you know, transactional.
100%. Yeah, I think we live even to today, we live in this fast food society, but fast relationship society or get rich quick type things. And I think the more that I learn about the biblical teachings, the slow way is the fast way. You know, a lot of the legacy companies or empires were built over 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. Like it takes time to build wealth. And so I think a lot of my mindset changed from trying to rush to a certain outcome of pleasure, which is the fast lane. And then as I started learning more of the biblical teachings, I just kind of went, oh, okay, there's actually some really deep philosophical parables and metaphors and stories in the Bible that actually make a lot of sense to me.
Mm,
It's like, yeah, we are here for a reason. We have a purpose, if not I don't think we would be here. So if we're still alive, what is that purpose? And so in doing that, that's the whole process in itself. But the day that we realize why are we here, which was for me, what really resonated was at the age of about 23, I realized it was around co-creating the healthiest people on the planet. And
Mm.
it's a co-creation. Anything's a co-creation. It wasn't just me. I was like, how can I? And so I started YouTube doing videos of like recipes, and I started podcasting 10 years ago, interviewing doctors and micro gut health specialists. And I think the more that I step into my purpose, the more that I add value to other people's lives, the more that I lean on habits and routines or parts of I guess values that maintain the family unit. I think a lot of society there's this spread out family dynamics that really pulls away power. I think
Mm.
there's a lot of power in family. Now, I come from a very quite unhealthy family with multiple divorces from my mom and my dad and things like this. My mom and my dad weren't married when they had me. So maybe these things, if they had actually followed more of the biblical teachings, I would have had not, I don't regret any of my story. I love who I've become, but at the same time, I think there was if they were to live more of a biblically based life, I think there would have been less chaos for them and less chaos for me. And the lessons may have been different growing up.
Yeah, no,
So yeah, I'm still figuring it out, David, to be honest with you. And just it's a process, man. It's a process.
uh, for sure. I'm 57, so I'm much older than you are, and I'm still figuring it out.
Okay.
Fine tuning it. I mean, I've along my journey, I've fine tuned it, and I mean, even in my entrepreneurial journey, I started out mental wellness only, and now I kind of a lot of people want mental wellness, but they don't want to talk about it. So now that's why I've pivoted with the message. You need your voice, and much like you said, you when you grew up, you didn't speak much, but now you're speaking all the time. Finding your voice and aligning yourself along that path, right? Your breakthrough path. Those are the most important things. So when I teach that, and then people go, well, I can't do that. Well, okay, can't I can work with. Can't is something, once we identify why can't you? What happened to you? Those are things I've been
Right.
trained to do. I'm not a therapist, and that's where I was, again, I was uncomfortable. I didn't want to be in that therapy area, but I knew how to help people, and I had helped, hundreds of people at that time. But it
Yeah.
really goes back to making sure you're your true self, and that's that authentic moment, right? That when you could be your most authentic person, whatever that is, as long as you're not doing any harm, right? We go back to that Ten Commandments stuff. You know, if you're not harming anybody and you're doing the best with your intentions, with a true intentions, not to get extra dollars, not to get extra this, then that's a true purpose.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and it's, I'm a big believer in goal setting. Goal setting
Sure.
is something that definitely works. It's one of those funny things though. Sometimes it's like if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans because
Yeah.
there's a different plan in store. As much as I can have my vision boards and my goal setting and time management, this and AI, supports, it's really, not up to me, but I do the best I can. I'm a big believer in goal setting. I think that's one of the things that I've always come back to in my times of feeling lost or confused or transitions or breakthroughs. I come back to goal setting, and I love setting goals, and I hold myself accountable. I put reminders in my phone. I have whiteboards everywhere around my house. Like
Mhm.
I'm always and trying to, surround myself with other high achievers. There are people out there who have lots of money and have wild levels of health and incredibly happy. We can have it all. They have the family, they have the support from others, they have all the successes, so to speak. I think it's possible, and I think the more that we can surround ourselves with other amazing people, the better. But yeah, I'm a big believer in setting like 10-year goals, 90-day goals, monthly goals, weekly goals, daily goals, and bringing that into every day. No matter where I am traveling, I'm always setting goals every week, reflecting on the week, and that's really been like a foundation for a lot of the progress that I've experienced throughout the years as well. Are you a goal setter, David?
I am. I used to just let things happen to me, but I think you have to because it's one of those things where I talk often about. is you have to see where you want to go to get where you want to go. You can't just magically end up anywhere. If you want to go, travel, right? You're in Dubai right now, but if you're gonna go to wherever your next place when it's right for you, you can't just go, okay, you have to get on a plane. You have to get on a plane to go to the right location, or to get you to that right location. So yeah, you have to see it, you have to plan it, and sometimes you might be the only one to see your vision because that's where your vision comes into play is sometimes we have to teach people our vision. Same thing with the peace, love, and bring a bat. People, I had all different people. Oh, it's a cool name, but people are going to think about violence and this and that. And then you walk around with a bat, they're going to get confused. Like, no, man, they know who I am. That's the brand. Who's Dave? Once you know, and that's why it's Uncle Dave. And even people gave me that. They're like, man, uncles, aren't always cool. And I'm like, well, that's not me. That's okay. I'm sorry that there's uncles like that. You know, ask my nieces, ask my nephews. Is Uncle Dave wacky? Sure, 100% guilty as charged. But is Dave inappropriate? Is yelling? Yeah, sure. I'll even put that in there. But not that type of inappropriate, man. I'm not in favor of that. Now I know we're getting close to the end of the episode. Uh, I'd love you to. I always say, walk into my magic garden, and if there's one more piece of advice, and you've given us a lot during this episode, could you have one more piece of advice that might help somebody?
Yeah, my biggest advice is what I call the life blueprint system. So it's a goal setting system that is a combination of all the personal development that I've accumulated over the years, as well as working with lots of people in groups and one-on-ones, and working with my business partner who's a neurofeedback therapist. So he understands neuroscience and goal setting and things like this from a scientific. So we actually created a process that maps out the next 10 years of life. And I think a lot of the time people have short-sightedness to just life, just getting to the end of the week, or just getting to the end of the month, or just getting to the end of the year. We never look past 12 months typically. But when you think about civilization, if you were running uh, uh, an empire, right, which is there were hundreds and hundreds of people that had to die, fall in love, connect, the passing moments of life. For us to be alive today is a genetic impossibility. It's a mathematical, like out of this world miracle that we're here. So what does that mean? It's like, well, let's start to refine our focus. I think we live in the world with social media where our attention is worth so much. I don't know if you ever saw some of those documentaries years ago around how much money is put into grabbing our attention on
Yep.
social media,
Yeah, 100%.
advertising
Yep.
things,
The al-
advertising.
the, the
And
algorithm
so,
genies. Yeah.
yeah. And then so, if we think about our power being in our focus and attention, and there's a quantum experiment that's called the observer effect, or also the double slit experiment. And it talks about the mere observation of looking at a certain thing, whether it be our goal, whether it be our family members, or whether it be even just water. It literally changes the molecules of that thing.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
it sounds
Dr.
woo-woo,
Amamoto. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yep.
Dr. Emoto. And so whether it be you look at water or you put on words on a piece of paper and you put it on a jar and you put water in the jar and you say love on the jar and you
Yep.
put it on one side of the house. Or you put another jar of rice and put hate on there and put it on another side. And each day for 30 days, they said to this one, I hate you, rice. You're the worst rice ever. And this one that had love on it, I love you. You're the best rice ever.
Yep.
And after 30 days, the rice that said, I love you on it was pretty perfect. You wouldn't eat it, but it was clean. The other one was moldy and
Yep.
gross. You'd get wildly sick if you ate that. And so that's the same thing with our body. Our body is this incredible vessel of the elements from the periodic table, but it's also got electricity and magnetism and water. And it's not just
100%.
normal tap water, right? It's this beautiful, structured, living water. And a lot of our life, we still don't know how amazingly powerful we are and how the brain and the mind and our spirit all works. But if there's one thing I can impart, it's the importance of our focus and our attention, to not focus on the past and to not focus on the future too much, but to focus in on the present and then directing our life based on our values and a 10-year vision. And there's about 8 areas of life, right? And it's what I do is I map out every 30 days. I go back to this, and every 90 days and every year. What are the main goals that I want in 10 years from now in the 8 areas? What do I want in 12 months? What do I want in 90 days, 30 days, and weekly? And making sure that everything I do is then tracking to line up to my 10-year vision. And if there's one thing I can teach anybody or impart, it's that the times where I have not just I haven't regretted anything in my life, but the times that were the biggest waste of time was when I didn't reflect on, are my actions today lining me up to where I want to be in 10 years? If you're wanting a family, are your actions right now lining you up to building that family? If you're wanting wealth, are your actions today lining you up? If you're wanting to be healthy or more grounded in your own spiritual connection, are the actions you're doing today feeding that and growing that, or is it taking that away? And so that's a process. If everyone wants to go to my website, zacdeane.com, and learn a bit more about it, you can under the Life Blueprint system.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it so much. And thank you for your time. This has been a great episode. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. Thanks for having me.
Okay. And for everybody else, as always, I want to wish you peace and love as a big foundation of your life. And when you bring it back, bring those awesome thoughts like we heard from Zach, and hope you hit your sweet spot. Thanks so much.